Well, hello there. This is when I used to say, hello, my elegant warriors, because this used to be the Elegant Warrior podcast or the Elegant Warrior YouTube channel, wherever you are watching. But now it is How to Advocate with Heather Hansen. We are in a new season, and it is a season where you need to become a strong advocate. Right now, I am recording right around the new year. Whether you're watching this later than this, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, you might be watching or listening in the middle of the summer. It doesn't matter. You still have changes you want to make. If you're watching or listening in real time, it is a time of change. A lot of people are making resolutions, setting intentions, putting their word for the year into action. And no matter what your resolution, no matter what your intention is, the only way that it will come true is if you learn to advocate. Let's say, for example, that you are resolving that you want to get in better shape and you want to lose 20 pounds. You're not going to be able to do that unless you learn to advocate for the time to do your workouts, the space in your house to do those workouts. Maybe you need to advocate for different meals and not to have as much junk food around the house. You must learn to advocate. Let's say that your resolution or your intention is to make more money in the coming year. You are going to have to advocate for raises or resources or support or investments. Let's say your resolution or your intention is that you want to get better relationships. You are going to have to advocate for more time to get into those relationships, or perhaps better boundaries. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do. Advocating is a skill that you must learn. It is a vital skill, and it can be taught. I teach people how to advocate. Now, where do I get the chops to do that? I was a trial attorney for 20 years. For 20 years, it was my job to advocate. It was my job to take a group of people, for me, it was a jury of 12, and help them to believe what I wanted them to believe, to help them to give me and my client what we wanted, which was a win. That was my job. And I learned the skill of advocating in the courtroom. Now I teach that skill to leaders who are advocating for change or for a new initiative or for their ideas. I teach it to salespeople who are advocating for their products and services. I teach it to women who are advocating for themselves, perhaps for the first time ever. And I'm here in this particular podcast or YouTube channel, wherever you are watching or listening, to teach it to you. I have a lot of experience in advocating. What is advocating? Advocating is overcoming doubts. An advocate has to learn to overcome doubts. One of the ways that you do that is by learning to cross-examine doubts. First, your own, because it's our own doubts that hold us back so much more than anyone else's, and then to cross-examine other people's doubts as well. Let me give you an example of how I would cross-examine doubts in the courtroom. My favorite thing to do in the courtroom was to cross-examine experts. I defended doctors in medical malpractice cases. So the parties, the injured patients who testified, everyone in the courtroom felt bad for them, including myself. Even if they were a little bit exaggerating their injuries, I did not feel appropriate to go after them hard. But if an expert came in and criticized my doctor, I was ready to cross-examine them with everything that I had. That's sort of where the warrior of Elegant Warrior comes in. The way that I would do that is by turning facts into evidence and stories into proof. So for example, if a doctor came in and said that pain in the lower back was a sign of an infection, and our side said that that was not true, then I would have to cross-examine the expert on that contention. I would do so, first of all, by looking through the medical records, facts that both sides had, to try to pick out pieces of the medical record that showed that there was pain in other areas of the body, that the pain came and went, that the type of pain this patient had was not a sign or symptom of an infection, but rather regular post-operative pain. So I would use the facts in the medical record, turn them into evidence, and then ask the expert questions about them. And that could be productive, especially if that expert didn't know the medical records. I would also look at medical journals, peer-reviewed journals, and pick out pieces from peer-reviewed journals that said that intermittent pain, pain that comes and goes, pain that is not very exaggerated or steep or tender, that type of pain is not a sign of an infection. And I would cross-examine the doctor with those records. But most fun of all and most effective of all was to look for old testimony that same expert had given to see if the expert had ever said that pain was not, in fact, a sign of an infection. And then to cross-examine that expert with their own words. That was always a winner. Juries always really looked at these types of experts with a lot of doubt after I was able to cross-examine them with their own words. But no matter what, I was using facts, turning it into evidence, and using it to go after something that this expert said. And you can do the same. In this podcast, in coming episodes of this podcast, I am going to teach you how to cross-examine, because that is one way to overcome doubts. You've got to cross-examine them. You've got to go after them. You've got to say, is that true? Prove it. Show me your evidence. Your evidence stinks. Here's better evidence. You've got to be aggressive when you're cross-examining. And I'm going to teach you how to do that in a future episode of How to Advocate. But more importantly than overcoming doubts, and I think especially when it comes to our own doubts, we focus so much on the doubts, the better way to advocate is to build belief. Not to worry so much about the other side or the negative voice in your head or the doubts that your client or customer has, and rather build belief in you so that those doubts are automatically overcome. Because doubts are a little bit like whack-a-moles. You can whack one down and a new one will pop up. But if you build belief, it can grow so high that you can't even see your doubts. And your customers, your clients, all of those people, they can't even see your doubts. And so in this podcast, in future episodes of this podcast, I'm going to teach you how to advocate to build beliefs. The way that you do that, again, is by turning facts into evidence and stories into proof. Because everyone has facts. You have facts. Let's say you're a leader and you're trying to get your team to come back to the office. You have facts, but your team has facts as well. And then you have a story of why it will be phenomenal, but they have a story about why it won't be phenomenal. And so in order to build belief, you have got to know how to use facts and use stories to build belief. That's why I always say facts tell, stories sell, but advocates win. And that is why my goal in life is to teach people like you how to become advocates. The way that you turn facts into evidence and stories into proof is often using what I call the 3 C's of an advocate, which are curiosity, compassion, and credibility. We're going to go deep into those in this podcast as well, in future episodes of this podcast. I have done this time and time again. One of the most difficult cases I had was an emergency room physician, and the case involved a young man who had been playing a pickup game of basketball, and he had passed out on the basketball court, taken to the hospital. My doctor was one of the doctors that saw him, and ultimately he died. And the patient's family sued the hospital and a bunch of the doctors, including my doctor. Immediately upon starting that case, the jury, the 12 people that we had chosen to be the jury in this case, they had beliefs. And because every single one of the jurors was a patient, not one of them was a doctor or even a nurse, they all had the beliefs of a patient. And so my job in that case was to build the belief so that they would have the same beliefs that we did, so that they would believe in our evidence and believe in our story and ultimately give us a win. And it was a very difficult case to try. It was extremely sympathetic. It was extremely compelling. And it's a case that I remember forever because it's the time in my life when I went from advocating for my clients in the courtroom to advocating for myself. So for years, I had gotten good at building belief in the courtroom, overcoming doubts, advocating for my doctors and nurses and techs that all worked in hospitals, all of them who I represented. And I was really good at it. And I could get tough and cross-examine when I had to. And I could build beliefs really effectively. But I was terrible at advocating for myself. And in this case, I ultimately ended up in the emergency room, having an allergic reaction to my own stress hormones because I did not know how to advocate for the resources, the help, the time, the break that I needed in my own life. Now, in the case, I was able to overcome doubts and I was able to build belief, and we won that trial, thank the Lord. But I realized that it was time for me to learn to advocate for myself. I could not continue to get myself sick and end up in the emergency room and have sleepless nights and be so worked up about whether or not each of my clients was going to win without also wondering and worrying about whether I was going to win, whether I was going to thrive, much less survive. And so I decided after that trial that I had to learn to advocate for myself. And I decided that I was going to do it with the same tools I used in the courtroom. Things like questions, overcoming objections, using evidence, turning facts into evidence, turning stories into proof, and using all of those things, those 3 C's, curiosity, compassion, credibility, to advocate for myself. And once I did, my life changed. I was able to write my books. I was able to start this podcast. I was able to be a TV anchor. I was able to move to New York City, which had been a dream of mine. I was able to end an unhealthy relationship. Everything changed when I learned to advocate for myself. And now I teach people like you how to do it. I give keynote talks to corporations, to leaders, to sales teams, and to women on how to advocate for, whether a leader advocating for their ideas or for change, sales teams advocating for their products and services, or women learning to advocate for their ideas so that their businesses can grow and benefit from those ideas. I also have a membership where I teach people like you how to advocate. This is my life's work. It's what I'm on this earth to do, and it is what lights me up. And so in the following episodes of How to Advocate, this is what I'm going to be doing. I am going to be teaching you first how to advocate to yourself so that you can advocate for yourself, because you always go first. I always say you can't prove it unless you believe it. And so you have got to be in belief before you can go out there and advocate. And it reminds me of, there's a book called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And one of the quotes from that book that reminds me of this idea of advocating to yourself before you advocate for yourself is in that book. He says, victorious warriors win first, and then they go to war. An advocate has to win themselves over first, and then they can be an elegant warrior in the actual advocating step. Now, we will talk about this in future episodes of how to advocate, but advocating is really 3 steps. It's knowing what you want, asking for it out loud and with delight, and mastering the art of the ask. So if you have some resolutions, if you're listening at the beginning of January and you have some resolutions, you want to lose weight, you want to make more money, you want to improve your relationships, you've got to get really clear and specific as to what you want from others. And then you can start asking with delight and mastering the art of the ask. Asking with delight only comes when you are in full belief yourself. And that is why victorious warriors win first, and then they go to war. You have got to persuade yourself first. And you do it the same way that you do others. Evidence, stories, turning them into proof, using questions, questioning yourself, cross-examining your negative thoughts. We're going to talk about all of that in future episodes of this podcast. We are going to, once you've learned to advocate for yourself, it is so much easier to advocate for your ideas, your business, your products, your services, your pocketbook, your health. And so I am going to teach you all of that. There are going to be episodes on how to advocate if you're a leader, how to advocate if you're in sales, how to advocate for your health if you're at a doctor's office, how to advocate for your children at the school or with the administration, how to cross-examine your negative thoughts, how to turn facts into evidence. These are going to be the future episodes of how to advocate, because advocating is a skill and there is no one out there who is teaching it to you until now. So you want to subscribe to this podcast or YouTube channel, wherever you are watching or listening. It comes out every Wednesday. I am consistent with the podcast. I will welcome your ideas, your questions, the things that you want me to talk about. The other thing that I'm going to do here is I normally read about 200 books a year. Now, last year was a chaotic year and I read 135 or 6, I'm still finishing one, books in 2023. I will have authors on who I think can contribute to this conversation about how to advocate. That's what I've done in the past with the Elegant Warrior podcast, and I promise to continue that for you here. You will leave each week with specific tools that are going to help you to become a stronger advocate in your life. So you will know how to ask for the changes in the way that you guys eat so that you can lose weight, how to ask for that raise, how to ask for that boundary and actually get it from the person that you are asking. There is a huge difference between communicating and advocating. When you communicate, you share perspectives. When you advocate, you change them. I am going to teach you how to change people's perspectives. I am going to teach you how to overcome their doubts and build their beliefs. I am going to teach you how to do this starting with you, and I'm going to teach you how to advocate. I'll do that using my 20 years of experience in the courtroom, my psychology degree, my experience as a TV anchor, and all of the books I read on these topics, because I want you to learn this skill. And I know that it's a skill that can be learned and honed and mastered. We're going to do this together. I am very excited to share these tools with you, and I can't wait to see you back here again next week.